Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. We're just going to wait about a minute or less for everyone to join. Okay, so we can get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. My name is Jenny, and I'm the host of our recurring TuMeke guest webinar series. I'm also a customer success manager here at TuMeke, and our team works with customers towards reaching their health and safety goals. So as general housekeeping, you're more than welcome to leave questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to that at the very end. But today we have a very special guest. David Brodie is a leading voice of workplace safety and has over 2 decades of experience in the field. He is the North American Ergonomics lead at Cargill, and that's where he has reduced workplace injuries by over 70% through designing effective ergonomics programs. So really excited to have him present today. You probably heard him, at various conferences, sharing his insights and experiences and passion for innovation for creating safer work environments. So I'm going to hand that over to David. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate it. I always like when we try and find new ways to reduce time. It's like 2 decades. It sounds less than 28 years. So I'll take it. We can tell from the gray hair that I've been doing this a while. So, but thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk here. Uh, the topic we're going to go through here, the one I proposed to Jenny was, where does computer vision fit into your ergonomics program? And the interesting thing is that this should uh, the your might be a little bit of a stretch. I'm definitely going to talk about how it fits into our program, and then you can make some decisions about how Cargill's doing it and see if it fits for what you do. So I'm going to walk through. We got about 20 minutes of talking, and then we got plenty of time for questions and that afterwards. Wanted to start off with a big broad view here, and this is again we're talking about fitting something into an ergonomics program, talking about fitting technology in, and with Cargill and with the way we've been running this program for years now, one of the things that happens with technology, it's the new shiny object, and there's a lot of work that gets done to bring you into doing and working with technology, and it might absorb a lot of time. And one of the things that we have to be very careful about was how much time and how much effort we spent focusing on different parts of the program to make sure we had a balanced approach. And there's two things on the screen I just wanted to highlight for you. And one was uh, as an overall strategy for Cargill, as we look at all kinds of programs, including our EHS programs, one of the philosophies that we've been working on for the last couple of years is this idea of simplify, modernize, and standardize. Very simple terms, but very straightforward goals, what we're trying to achieve. And in reality, what we're trying to look at is that at a corporate level, when we put programs out there to our plants, we have to really consider what we're asking them to do and how we can effectively implement those pieces. And so finding ways to simplify what those pieces are and making sure that they're accessible to our folks out there, that from a time perspective, from an effort, that we just don't continue to add and add and add. So simplifying what we put out there. And part of how you can simplify is looking at this modernize is to say, are there new ways to do it? For a lot of us, we've been doing ergonomics the same way for a long time with slow steps forward. And technology over the last 3 to 5 years has really started to give us opportunities to say, are there new things, newer ways we can do it that can make it more accessible and help our plants, help our folks out there bring ergonomics to their locations? And by doing that, trying to standardize and standardizing so that we are using a similar process, similar tools so that we can talk between our plants, look at our results, look at how things are happening in our facilities, and know that we are comparing apples to apples on a regular basis and that we're staying good with that. And the
I like,
circle on the
oh,
left hand, oh, sorry.
I was just saying I like this process a lot as well because some people get fixated on just standardizing, just finding an approach and then making it, codifying it as soon as possible. But I like that you put in simplify first, right? You don't want to, like you said, keep adding and bloat the program. I do agree that, yeah, being able to simplify and modernize are two key steps before standardizing.
Yes. And it gives you a really good approach to looking at everything that you're considering and you're doing so that every time you're trying to make a change, you put those things in your mind so that you're starting to think about who is your customer. And when you're at a corporate level, your customer, everybody at the plant, and making sure that everything functions well for them. Um, the other thing that we wanted to make sure is that there's technology can fit into multiple parts of your ergonomics program. And we're thinking about it in different ways, but we also just wanted to make sure that when you look at this pie, we on a regular basis, we looked at all of the tasks that we were doing over the course of a year. And what it came down to is that we really could divide them up into some key strategic focuses to say, these are things that need to be done, and we need to put time into every one of them. And we need to make sure that we don't spend exorbitant amounts of time in different areas and don't let certain things basically use all our time and not allow you to make some progress forward. So we spend time focusing on managing the program, which is building the policies and procedures, building the competency of our people across the organization, whether it's building it or building the materials and content to advance how we do things. Probably one of our biggest focuses, obviously, is the measure and control piece, which is how do we focus on risk and reducing the risk in our plants. That's going to be a big focus of what we talk about today. Visualize is basically how do we visualize risk? How do we visualize our progress, our results, and how do we present it in a fashion that's meaningful to our folks that are doing the work in the plants, all the way up through our operations so that they understand with less and less jargon what exactly are we doing and what are we trying to communicate. And finally, we spend time on innovation, which is kind of continuing this circle here of building the process so that all those first four pieces of the pie are always in place and you make sure they're working well. The innovation piece is how you start thinking about how do we continue to get better and what are the new opportunities and should we introduce them type of thing into the process. So that's the big picture what we're doing here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to step through a couple of these pieces of the pie, primarily on the left-hand side, to talk about how we looked at computer vision as part of our process here at Cargill.
And like how it's a wheel because it just shows that it is an iterative process. It's not just linear. You're always going back and innovating and coming back and trying that and starting that process over again.
It's you try and make sure that pieces are running well, and what you don't do with the innovation, or what you do with the innovation, is you plan for the future, but you don't drop new things in until you've tested and made sure they're ready to go in.
Mm-hmm.
So we always have that as a piece of the puzzle to always think for the future. With the measure and control piece, again, we took that simplify, modernize, and standardize, and we turned it into individual goals at each piece of the pie. So when you start thinking about that simplification of the measure and control piece, how do you go out and do your risk assessments? And we have to start thinking about as we expanded where we are focusing within Cargill. How do we find tools that are user friendly for people to work with? How do we go beyond certain uh, either more complicated tools or paper-based tools that are more cumbersome, ways that basically try and help the person do the assessment and make it easier for them to do that. And of course, the modernized piece is paying attention to, is there technology that can help us do the work, and paying attention to not can it do it, can it do it well, and can it streamline the process so that it becomes easier for people at the plant level to actually do the work. So it's thinking to their level, not just is it cool, but does it make life easier? So it's always thinking about those improvements in that fashion. And if it does work, and we do take time to make sure it does work, even once we've gotten past the innovation and into the implementation stage, that you slowly figure out how do you make that the standardized process. So with that, one of the, a lot of us may have this kind of approach. We've gone through different levels and we've been using the basic tools for a long time. And to be truthful, we call them basic now because it's 15 years later. But 15 years ago, we weren't doing anything. We were using basic checklists. We were just using a straight hazard identification tool. And we moved into more available tools that were scientifically created and validated at that time. And we got better at it. Everything that we've done in cardio has gotten better by using those tools. But you also reach a ceiling. And one of the things that we ran into is that using these tools and how you explain them, what it ends up being on a regular basis is when you're trying to explain risk reduction and the project you're working on to your operations team, a lot of times you're using very basic language like we did a REBA, we got a score of X, and we reduced it by this much. And sometimes when you're trying to explain things that way, one, you have to start almost every meeting explaining what is REBA, what is NIOSH, what are these different tools. And then two, you're trying to say that I found the one thing, here's the one thing that was wrong. And if you reduce this score, we are good. And the reality is that helped us find some problems and fix things. But we recognize that maybe we could get better and actually explain risk at a better level and maybe communicate it better with our leadership team. And again, that really came down to when was something available that helped us get better. And so one of the things that when we've considered should we modernize, should we use something, is that we had some concerns about accuracy of the information. We have a lot of a lot of plants that are working with these tools. We have people that have varying levels of background in ergonomics, varying levels of experience. And the reality is some people are excellent at doing assessments and they've had a lot of experience. And some people, it's brand new. And honestly, for the first 6, 12 months, they may have challenges using these tools and make errors, even though we consider maybe the most simplest tools. So the accuracy, the competency of those peoples, and how do we build them up, and how do we know when they finally get to that good point to jump in and really do good assessments? The communication of that risk. So going from just showing a picture of REBA and saying 8 is bad to how do we help explain that in a better way and help show exactly what we're talking about. And by doing all those things is to try and build a better level of trust from our ops leadership that we're doing things at a high enough level to justify some of the solutions that we're proposing.
I like that you take a realistic approach on this because not everyone, like you said, is going to be amazing at assessments. They might have other skills, but when you have everyone use this very technical process like REBA, you are going to get a lot of variation. So it's good that you recognize that as well.
And the fact is, we think that REBA is simple, but a brand new user is still going to make mistakes, and it happens, and it's just reality. And when you're saying to someone, you have to find the worst position, the worst case in that job and analyze it, you're relying on a decision, and that decision is going to be different from time to time type of thing. So, and from person to person. So for us, when we looked at computer vision and TuMeke, what we kind of looked at is that we have a system that now can process those postures and give a visual to everybody across the entire time that the person is doing their work. And what that visual, I mean, some people get into conversations about, is the red all the time? Is it everything perfectly aligned at all times? There's yeses and nos to that, but I think what we have to kind of think about is what are we trying to achieve? And what we're trying to achieve is improving the ability of a person to make decisions. And doing that without getting them embedded into saying, do you know every tool? Now you can say, can you take a good video? Can we show you, teach you how to get the right angles to make sure you can process things properly? It reduces the competency of having to be perfect at every tool and gets you thinking more directly about risk and solutions. So we're trying to remove that barrier there and how much time it takes to get good at certain things. You still have to know what the tools are. You still have to teach that. But some of those little barriers to say, am I doing it right? Am I catching everything that I need? And in the case of, say, a REBA or a NIOSH, are you doing multiple assessments that you should be doing? And this allows you to kind of get more and more of the accurate view of your job. So we looked at competency, we looked at the accuracy and consistency. Uh, in other words, we looked at it by using an AI-based system. We're looking at an algorithm that is making a common decision at all times about risk versus the variability of 38, 50 humans looking at a situation and making their decisions. Looking at the communication piece, we'll talk a little bit more on that in a second. And then, of course, the support that we can give remotely. The fact that with this system, and we have a limited number of ergonomists that work for Cargill, we don't have to travel to help additional plants at this point. I mean, there's a lot of projects that I've been able to do over the last 3 years where I've never had to travel. I already know what a lot of those plants look like. So by eliminating travel to do a lot of these assessments, I mean, the time and cost savings are quite significant relatively quickly.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a very overlooked fact too. I can't imagine how much travel you had to do beforehand, and just the time and cost savings that takes. Right, it's not like you can just teleport to that location. You have to get there, stay there for a while, come on site, and just think about how much more you can now distribute your expertise. Right, you actually can stay more in your zone of expertise and offer that help without having to do all the other logistical, physical moving between facilities.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if someone wants me to come and look at a manual material handling task, I don't need to see another person lifting a box. I know what that looks like. I know what a pallet. I can tell you the shape of everything, the size of everything. Mm-hmm. We know all that. Now let's look at your situation and let's help you evaluate that. So the idea of saying, are you spending your time appropriately? You go to a more complicated project. You travel where you need to. But things that are more simple, we can do it remotely, and I can teach you remotely simply by working through the system and saying, okay, let's take this video, take this, and we say, okay, you see how this is not working properly. Let's go get this information. A lot of it can be done that way. The other piece that's really important too is the visualization. So when a lot of times if you're using, again, I'll use Reba as the basic here, but you're just using the paper tool or a spreadsheet based tool and you see everything on the screen and you see your lookup tables. And the visualization of risk and trying to make sure people understand how to use each little piece and think about it, that's not always easy for everybody. So finding ways to, again, simplify how you present information, using better visuals and tools to help understand that risk. And then again, turning that into dashboards and tools that will help you manage the program at a better level and everybody talking in the same language. So when we look at multiple modes of communicating, now when you're finished an assessment, the idea of not just getting a score, and a lot of times we're just using the final score, saying, okay, you got a 10, let's fix that. Whereas when you start looking at things with greens, yellows, oranges, reds, you start to understand actual exposure, all kinds of different things that are going on at that job and the total risk that you're actually seeing, not just that one point in time, but the overall exposure. And you can start getting people to think that way, that it's not always trying to find the red, that orange is also something we need to fix. What do we need to do? And then, of course, this simple, straightforward idea that how do I get the job better? Well, here are some options. The fact that we can get tools that will say, if you want to reduce REBA, if you want to reduce your NIOSH score, if you want to reduce the risk, here are the things you need to think about, which then at least starts the brainstorm. So I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. That's still the job of the person. The creativity is in the solution. You just have to understand the risk properly, right? So the more you understand that and use the tools, the more you work towards those solutions, and you know that if I do this, the outcome will reduce the risk. And that's where we want to get people to.
Point. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was going to say that's such a key point too, because, beforehand, like you said in the previous slide, you would have to, like as a fellow practitioner, you'd have to just really go into numbers, right? You get fixated on these numbers only and how to reduce that specific number. But now it's more holistic. You're looking at a whole body system working together. It's not just that one number. It's, how the upper arm and the trunk work together. And it's just so much more compelling visually to communicate to people who may not necessarily are familiar with, what a 10 means versus a 4, versus a 15.
understand your job more, not just a single number, but understand your overall exposure is really what you're able to do at this point. The other thing that we really liked about it, and was something that we wanted to make sure with some of the plants, is that uh, we want to engage employees more. So a lot of those tools, you have to go back, finish your assessment, and then come back and say, okay, here's what we want to do. But we're now in a situation where on site at the time of doing the assessment, we can look at something and say, okay, here's a job that we want to fix. Here's the risk now. And not just come back and say, here's what we've done. You can actually have the conversation with the employee and say, try this. Does that work for you? And they can even tell you at that point, no, this is not functional for me. How about this? Does that feel any better? And once you get to a point on this coaching piece of saying, okay, here's a technique. I'm not saying this job is fixed at this point, but we can say that we've had a meaningful conversation, that we've talked with the employee and said, okay, you had a concern about this. Let's try it this way and at least make a minor change that is a progress forward. And we validated that that change is actually doing something, and not just saying the employee saying, oh, yeah, this is cool. Thanks for coming out type of thing. This is we've put some numbers to this to actually say and understand that we're making a change. So what you're seeing there is that the visualization is going to the assessor, to leadership to understand the risks, and directly to the employee at different points in times, depending on what you're trying to do. So that gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of power to really drive some change out there. And then the last
I was going to say too. Sorry, just to interject for a second too. You mentioned a minor change, but even that minor change can have a huge impact, because I think just the fact that you were there demonstrating care, right? If someone's complaining, just to see that someone is, working on the solution, and that conversation you have to foster trust within each other and trust in your role, I think can make a huge difference too. Even if like the solution might be vaguely, potentially minor because of it's just a behavioral solution. You're not buying anything huge, any huge equipment for it. I do think it can have a big impact, just even psychologically for that person.
Well, I mean, you've automatically got engagement, which is huge. You've already engaged, not just from the perspective of they were listened to and they were helped, but also to have a discussion about what potential hazards they have. And yes, we did one little simple thing, but maybe they think about something afterwards, that whether it's that task or another task, you're slowly ingraining ergonomics into the culture and how we look at things. And again, making it accessible so that the employee is not looking at it that you did something and walked away. You took a video and you went back to your office and maybe something did or did not happen. These are conversations that can happen on the spot type of thing. And having that mentality is huge.
And the question I had for you too, I know people would probably ask me a lot, is how do people react to this idea of like AI and computer vision when you're taking that video?
I mean, obviously you have to be perfectly open up front about what you're doing. I mean, if you have taken videos before, you can open up the app right there and show them what it's going to be doing so that you can inform them at that point. And then in most cases, it's very, we're out there trying to say we're looking at this and trying to understand it, if it's a hazard or anything that we need to do. So once you explain what it does and you take a video and then within a few minutes you show them exactly what you're looking at, it eliminates that barrier, that thing of what are you doing that is this special risk assessment that you're not telling me about. I can show them right then. There is no, I'll get back to you in a few days. This is, I show you right then. So if we said, did the conversation happen? Yeah, it did. Someone was there, someone did something. And to be honest, when you talk about the simplify and modernize piece, it's that solution was done and already documented by the time you leave. And so from a time perspective for the person that's out there helping, it's like the workload all of a sudden becomes, again, once you get into it, you have to get into the mode. I'm not going to say you're going to be perfect from day one, but once you've developed that into your process, you can start to think about how do I make this easier and easier. And if you walked away and said, okay, that's not a low enough risk, then at least you've documented that I've put a work practice control in place and I need to go back and find a better way to do it, that our hazard is not low enough, and you've documented that it's not low enough. So you've achieved all the goals you should achieve by looking at that job and making sure you're continuing to move forward. Um, the last piece I'll talk about here is the innovation piece, where again, we will continue to look at our process, everything we do, how we train people, how we measure and control, and how we visualize. All those things will continue to be looked at to say, can we do it better? Did we make too complicated spreadsheets, tools, the whole way we integrate, we work with things? Is there different ways to do it that each time is always about, simplifying and making it better? And also within that innovation piece is making sure that we're doing things the right way. And one of the things that we did early on is that we wanted to make sure, because we were measuring risk reduction, that's one of the things we want to make sure. What we actually wanted to know is there any differences in scoring, anything that happens if I take the video in one angle now and a different angle a week from now or 2 months from now, if I'm doing an engineering solution, to kind of say, I want to make sure that if I'm measuring, I'm getting apples to apples. And one of the things we were able to do is get a grant from the National Safety Council, their MSD Solutions Lab. And we were able to partner with, when I say partner, essentially the University of Waterloo did all the work. They had a great team there led by Dr. Fisher. We had 2 PhD students involved. We had 1 master's student, Julia, who was she was a former co-op student that worked for us at Cargill. And they were able to do this project where we were able to collect data with 8 cameras, use the Theia 3D system, and process each of those angles with computer vision and understand, are there better angles to take videos at that give you more accurate information? Is there any difference from angle to angle? So trying to answer those questions. And we've got great input that we'll be able to give to our plants, but we're also the university, and through the Cree MSD group, they're going to be developing a white paper that will provide the details of the results of this study and recommendations to people on how to take good video, how to use systems like computer vision to achieve the best possible results at this point. So good, helpful for Cargill, but we present the idea that this is a question that we have. Hopefully it answers a question for other people as well.
And of course, I have to ask if you can reveal some of the white paper findings. What, from a training's perspective, I'm sure people want to know what has been a good angle, an optimal angle that you found so far in your study.
Well, I think it won't be surprising to anybody, but either perfectly sagittal or 45 degrees to the front of the person. Those give you the most. Obviously, if you're perfectly sagittal, it means you're going to get one side of the body well. You're not going to get the opposing shoulder and upper arm as well. So that's why that 45 degrees to the front gives you the best chance to see both arms moving through and with less occlusion, and it gives you the best angle. So from the back is the higher level of air coming out of it. Direct front, again, you're going to lose a little bit of the. It's not as bad as the back, but it's again those 45 degrees to the front are probably the best. And honestly, what we end up telling people is it's not just what's best, but also we tell people now, if you can't get that angle, don't use the system. So we don't want to use it when it has the potential for a higher error, and you're really not. Sometimes you just have to go back to your beginning and say, take a picture, take a video, and go back to your piece of paper and do the REBA as you had to. But whenever possible, use the technologies. So moving forward for us, this is all trying to make ergonomics accessible to more people. So not saying you have to be an ergonomist, but we are saying you should talk to one when you're doing this. So we're not taking the ergonomist out of the picture. We're saying the ergonomist doesn't have to be there all the time. And if you're a remote site and you don't have those resources, this makes it more accessible. And being able to show people and have these meetings and show these images, it really does help out. And then helps with the communication. And for us, the impact is just continuing to grow with Cargill. So we got 14 plants active right now, 120 assessments at least. That was like when I originally created these slides. We're definitely above that at this point. controls are being pushed out there. 35% of those assessments led towards more engineering-based controls or beyond work practice, but 3% were direct one-on-one interactions with people. So no matter what, there was conversations.
Yeah, and that's a great percentage as well because, again, just that talking piece can be really big, and it's could be very inspiring for people who may not always be able to implement those engineering controls or spend money. So that's really encouraging for those who still want to make an impact through just coaching and that interaction.
At least you've done something immediately, and then you can move on to we're pushing more to go back to some of those assessments and saying, what more can we do? Let's not make sure we go too far down the, video taking, happy time type of thing and just saying, hey, we want to get all the cool videos and remember what we're here for. The tool's helping you get there, but we're making sure everybody stays focused to get to that final point. And of course, if anybody we'll take some questions now, and anybody who wants to connect with me afterwards and ask questions or any other details, by all means, LinkedIn is the easiest way to get in touch with me as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. And thank you all for staying till the end. Great presentation. I really love what you said about creativity is in the solution. That's a good takeaway. I'll keep in my pocket there as well. Let's see. So, someone was just asking if the QR code is working. We could try. If not, you can find. I don't know if I have my phone with me.
I thought it was. It was at one point. I apologize if it's not, but if you look at
you
Brodie
have
or Ergo, you'll find me on LinkedIn. The gray hair stands out when you see the picture, so you'll know it's me.
And Maggie Thomas asks, when will the white papers be shared?
I need to check back with the university where I'll find out what status it's. They were still in the middle of processing. We actually had 4 different computer vision systems, 8 cameras, 40 subjects, 6 tasks. So there was a lot of data to process, and they wanted to make sure they got to a good endpoint to kind of be able to make the best full recommendations. I believe everything was moving quite well towards the end of last year, but I'll check back, and they'll be broadcast online and definitely on LinkedIn when that is available, and through the National Safety Council and the MSD Solutions Lab. So when the white paper is available, it will be available on their website as well.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. The chat is disabled. Yes. So I was going to say, I know we don't have as many questions this time, but you would want to ask in the Q&A box. It's like a few icons over from chat if you do have any questions. Let's see. So Clark says, when you say computer vision, are you referring to a specific computer system called computer vision?
No, just it's referring to the technology. So obviously I wouldn't be on this specific webinar if we weren't using TuMeke type of thing. So that is obviously the one we're using, but I use computer vision as a general discussion of the technology of using the images and AI-based analysis or algorithms to take videos, process it, and be able to, in this case here, process it specifically to see postures and motions. So there are obviously other systems out there. Our process at Cargill, we use TuMeke.
Thank you for clarifying. And I think that's actually it for questions. If anyone else wants to add one more before we go. But looks pretty good. Very comprehensive, David. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, David, for your time and expertise. It's always great seeing those specific examples too. Like I always love seeing just on the job, like on the ground videos. So thank you for sharing some of that with us as well, and your ethos, the company ethos.
You're welcome.
Hopefully some people will take some time. Oh, and we do have a few more. Someone says, thank you. Some people say thank you. Greg says, have you tried to use AI to solve a return to work situation?
We are definitely looking at it, especially as we're using on-site physical therapists and athletic therapists at certain sites. So from the perspective of, looking at what the risk is and what maybe their current state is, it's being looked at. But to say, are we using it as do we have a process where we say, do we use this for return to work? No, not yet. We'll use it as the risk assessment to recommend accommodations, to kind of look at, is there anything we need to do to make the job accessible to that person? So if we understand that they have a restriction for shoulder motion or back motion, we can use that to document. And as I showed you in that image before, you could see exactly how much shoulder motion, what range they're in, and be able to document specifically, okay, this job is accessible, or here's what we have to remove in order to accommodate this person at this point.
Yeah. So it's almost like there's an overlap there in terms of
it's an overlap, but it's also without having to be an expert at understanding human motion and evaluating. Now you have a documentation of, if I do this job and here's the cycle, here's the job being done, I now have a visual of their exposure for the whole job. So now you can work directly with a healthcare professional to say, can we get this approved for return to work? How do we make accommodations? And even when you do the accommodation, then you can actually go and revalidate that those risky positions have been removed.
That's an excellent answer. Yeah, thank you. All right. I think that's it. Warner says, thank you. Very excited for this technology. Julie says, thank you. Appreciate you sharing your insights.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for showing up.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, stay tuned for the next one. And thanks again, David, again, for your time and expertise.
Thank you.
Bye,
Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.